As more and more people celebrate the life of country singer Toby Keith, it's important to remember his path to stardom was rarely easy. These are some of the greatest tragedies that befell the country legend. In 2013, Forbes got up close and personal with Toby Keith, saying that he was worth somewhere upwards of $500 million, and that he'd spent the previous 5 years making more than $48 million annually. However, Keith also knew what it was like to be on the other side of the income scale, and his success hadn't happened overnight. In fact, Keith had faced some devastating setbacks before hitting it big. Before becoming a country singer, he was both a semi-pro football player and a worker in the Oklahoma oil fields. He started there at the end of 1979, making a whopping $50,000 per year, which equates to over $200,000 in today's money.
I played defensive end for the Oklahoma City Drillers. There's the old jersey. That was when I was really stupid.
However, this lavish life was incredibly short-lived, and when demand for U.S. oil started dropping, the industry started to fail. By the time things stabilized, hundreds of thousands of people were out of jobs, including Keith. Keith later told the Associated Press that he hadn't saved a penny, and that meant he found himself with next to nothing. However, he learned from this mistake and was much more careful with his money moving forward. During this tough time, Keith turned to music. However, his career as a country star had a rocky start of its own. He explained to the outlet, "All through this whole thing, the only constant we had was music, but it's hard to sit back and say, I'm going to make my fortune singing music or writing music. I had no contacts." It's a common misconception in the music industry that once an artist is signed to a label and they have a hit or two under their belt, the rest of their career is smooth sailing. For his part, Toby Keith had been pretty straightforward about the fact he struggled after releasing his massive 1993 hit Should Have Been a Cowboy. Even though it was considered his big break and remained the most popular country song of the decade, he found himself facing something of a crisis. At the time, there was a shift in country music, which was becoming less traditional and more pop-inspired. Keith had no interest in going in that direction, but felt overwhelming pressure from his record label to do exactly that. In an interview with the Associated Press, he explained, "They were trying to get me to compromise, and I was living a miserable existence. Everybody was trying to mold me into something I was not." By 1999, his label had continued to reject songs, and Keith felt he had no choice but to spend $93,000 to buy out his contract. After leaving Mercury, his first label, following a feud with producer Luke Lewis, he switched to DreamWorks. However, DreamWorks ultimately acquired Mercury, and he found himself working with his old nemesis yet again. Speaking with Forbes, Keith explained that he was sure that Lewis detested his music. While he would ultimately release 5 platinum albums with DreamWorks, it seems he never saw this era as a particularly warm point in his career. The life of a beloved parent is priceless, but after a tragic 2001 accident took the life of Toby Keith's father, Hubert Koval Jr., the Koval family learned just how much the life of their patriarch was worth. After a lawsuit found that Rodriguez Transporters of Tulsa was responsible for the accident, TextLawyers.com reported that Keith's family was awarded $2.8 million. The incident happened in March 2001 when Koval was driving home from a friend's barbecue. He was pronounced dead on the scene after his truck crossed into oncoming traffic and collided with a tour bus, leaving the family to wonder just what had happened. Keith spoke with the Oklahoman, saying, "I hate to speculate, but I think he had a stroke. It was early part of the afternoon, time for him to cat around. Something happened to get him over the median. He was only going 35 miles per hour. He was too good a driver." The courts agreed that something wasn't right, and it was discovered that the bus that collided with Koval hadn't been properly serviced. The wrongful death suit found in favor of the Kovals, and it's safe to say that no amount of money can bring back a beloved father. Keith honored his father's memory by penning songs such as Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American, and American Soldier. One of Toby Keith's closest friends was former basketball star Wayman Tisdale, who was diagnosed with bone cancer after breaking his leg. Tisdale was transitioning into a musical career and bonded with Keith over his new line of work. The two got to be such good friends that Keith would give him use of his tour buses when he was out on the road. That ended up being how the country singer found out about Tisdale's passing. On a video for his Facebook page, Keith shared the sad story. Tisdale had asked if he could use the bus and given him considerable notice. As the requested weekend neared, Keith couldn't get in touch with him, and after days of trying, he found out Tisdale had passed away.
Our secretary called and said they heard Wayman had died. I didn't believe it, and I called his phone back, and I got his voice message.
Crying for Me was written for Tisdale's funeral, but Keith said he just couldn't bring himself to sing it at the event. He ended up recording it and later told The Boot, "He was a great guy with a charismatic smile and the closest thing to Jesus I've ever met." Tisdale was 44 years old at the time of his 2009 death. In 2013, a massive tornado tore through the center of Moore, Oklahoma, causing winds of over 200 miles per hour and massive destruction throughout the area. Toby Keith wasn't there to see the tornado tear through his hometown, but soon after, he and a CNN correspondent walked through what remained of the most severely damaged areas. Speaking with Today, Keith explained how painful it was to witness a place he knew and loved so deeply so wholly ripped apart. He also stated that he very nearly lost a member of his own family in the carnage. His son-in-law was part of the rescue efforts and suffered through a few potentially deadly incidents, including electrocution. In an interview with WENN, Keith spoke about just how proud he was that his son-in-law had headed out to brave the deadly storm to help anyone he could. Even after his truck flipped over and he got electrocuted, Keith said he managed to fight through injuries to rescue members of his community. Despite encountering near-fatal situations repeatedly throughout his rescue attempts, he continued, quote, trying to help people and trying to dig people out. Toby Keith's Easy Money Band has been with him since the start of his music career. He explained to Rolling Stone that the name came to him after he was given $1,000 to play at a wedding right out of high school. While he and his collaborators went on to make history after that gig, over the years he's had to say goodbye to 2 band members under tragic circumstances. In 2013, bassist and songwriter Chuck Goff Jr. was killed in a car accident. It was being investigated at the time of the announcement, and in a statement via the Oklahoman, Keith said, "He was a close friend for over 25 years, the band leader and bass player. Our hearts and prayers go out to his family." Then, in 2016, Keith posted a Facebook video tribute to another bandmate, Joey Floyd. The video of the onstage performance was accompanied by a caption that read, "Our brother Joey has passed away. He is now free of all pain. He will be missed forever. Rest in peace, little buddy." In another post, Keith wrote, "There will be a hole on stage and a hole in the hearts of all that loved him. The official cause of Floyd's death was cancer." On June 12, 2022, Toby Keith posted a very personal message on X, formerly known as Twitter, revealing that he had been diagnosed with stomach cancer and had been going through treatment for several months. He wrote, "I spent the last 6 months receiving chemo, radiation, and surgery. So far, so good. I need time to breathe, recover, and relax. I'm looking forward to spending this time with my family, but I will see the fans sooner than later." Stomach cancer is relatively rare, and the American Cancer Society says that only about 1.5% of new cases of cancer diagnosed in the U.S. annually are stomach or gastric cancer. Keith remained candid but optimistic, and in September of 2023, he spoke with E! News about the announcement that he was the People's Choice Country Awards recipient of the Country Icon Award. His cancer was responding to treatment at the time, and he described his experience with the disease as a roller coaster.
You get good days and you're up and down, but it's always 0 to 60 and 60 to 0, but I feel good today.
Then, in early 2024, he appeared on The Bobby Bones Show, where he spoke about his diagnosis, treatment, and the long-lasting impacts he experienced. Keith revealed that between COVID and cancer, he went about 3 years without performing, which he found quite difficult to come to terms with. He had undergone stomach surgery that also impacted his diaphragm and, by extension, his ability to sing. When Toby Keith passed away on February 5, 2024, it's safe to say that it was a shock. Although he had been candid about his health issues, his cancer diagnosis, and his treatment, he'd also been performing before sold-out audiences in the months leading up to his death. In fact, his final Instagram post came just hours before his death. Alongside a short clip of Keith triumphantly raising his guitar before a cheering crowd, a now eerie caption read, "And that's a wrap on the weekend, y'all. Back to it." Keith's final television performance was at the People's Choice Country Awards in September 2023, when he thanked God for the strength he'd found during his treatments. He also performed live in December that year, headlining a series of 3 Las Vegas shows. Also in his final months, he shared some advice for aspiring singers and songwriters, posting a video message on X encouraging artists to work on their craft daily. Tributes poured in after his passing and were perhaps best summed up by country band Old Dominion. They wrote on X, "Toby Keith was a true trailblazer, authentic and heartfelt, but always with a wink till the end. He was larger than life in so many ways, and his music will live on forever. Raising our red solos tonight. You will be missed by so many. Peace."